Floyd Green, welcome to Profile.
Thank you, happy to be here.
Quite a story, so this is actually a two-parter, okay. And because there's so many different kinds of things to unpack. So the Cliff Notes version before we go into the details. Born and raised in St. Elizabeth, which you're very proud of. I think I listened to an interview with you and I did not, there was not a town or place that you mentioned that you were not beaming about. So this is Jamaica's breadbasket and a member of parliament for Southwest St. Elizabeth, which they call a bellwether, I think, in politics. Meaning that wherever that constituency votes is where the country generally goes.
Absolutely.
Won by, I think, at one point about 10 votes. We'll get into how difficult that is. Grew up in a community in Junction, St. Elizabeth. Parents had different political leanings. Munro College, then off to college, then then government, then a resignation, then back to government. Quite a story. So let's start at the beginning. First of all, the story starts in Junction, St. Elizabeth. Tell me a little bit about growing up in that community.
It's amazing. I think my deep love for St. Elizabeth came from growing up in St. Elizabeth, growing up in Junction. It was the time where people truly looked out for everybody, where clearly, we have big families, so you have a lot of cousins all around you. You have a framework that you engage in that's wholesome, Church was a big part of that growing up experience, both having a Church of God youth fellowship and just going and being around the reverend who is your granduncle, visiting your grandfather. So it was a family affair. It was a family experience growing up in St. Elizabeth. And it was, it wasn't about what you had. It was just about the joy from interactions, the joy from being around people. And I think it gave you a genuine appreciation of life in general.
Now, tell me about the people who raised you.
So, my mother and father. My mother is a teacher, and she dealt with all the discipline matters and raising in general. Daddy is an agriculturalist, but spent most of those formative years for me in Cayman, where he worked in Cayman. I'm trying, as a number of other Jamaicans, trying to ensure that his family would have a better way of life. So mommy did a lot of the upbringing and the disciplining and keeping me in check. But I have always felt that I'm a good reflection of both of them. And if you get to know their personalities, Daddy is very outgoing, very engaging. I think I get my political personality from Daddy. Mommy is like just the most kind-hearted person you can meet, empathetic, will give her soul, and is more of a homebody, but is also very engaging. So a very interesting dynamic, and as you highlighted, from different political backgrounds. When I grew up, my father was strongly PMP, and my mother supported the Labour Party, but we never spoke politics. So I grew up in a completely non-political household.
They did not even mention.
Not at all.
I want to circle back to talking a little bit about Junction, because as I said, it's a small community in St. Elizabeth, but certainly one of the more well-known ones, probably island-wide, I would say. And it was a couple of years ago, in the last 5 years, that Junction got piped water.
Yeah, so we grew up not having water from an NWC supply, but it's one of the things about the resilience of people from St. Elizabeth. I always share the story. Growing up, you never really appreciated that the story is that you don't have pipe water, because again, all our houses are built with tanks. You capture rainwater, you have that harvesting, and only when you go through the summer months that water would completely, your tank would be dry, that you would realize that, boy, this is a real issue.
When you reflect on yourself now as an older man, as a child, what were you like?
I was always the smallest of the bunch. Right, but I probably was also always the loudest of the bunch, right, and maybe it was a compensated mechanism.
Have you siblings, I mean?
In general, of my friends, of my siblings, of high school, that was me. But I always got involved, and Munro really helped shape me in a major way, in terms of involvement, in terms of self-belief, in terms of just finding other things to do outside of academics. So I was always into service. I was always into, whether it be quiz, whether it be clubs, whether it be co-curricular activities, I always did that. And it's the same thing even in community, whether it be youth club, whether it be church, right? There was always a level of involvement. So I guess looking back, I was the loud, engaging, think himself humorous, but a friend to all, and I think I got that from Daddy, a friend to all.
Let's talk a little bit about Munro. That there is not a guest that I interview, once you talk to them about which school they go to, that doesn't end that sentence about which school you went to, like the best school. Mm-hmm. But for you, you have said that it was very formative. What was it about Munro?
A number of things. Clearly, we all know Munro is an all-boys school, but the first thing Munro does is instill a sort of connection, a sort of loyalty, a sort of passion about the institution, right? And because it does that, it also builds your own sense of connection, passion, and what's your own story. So Munro told its story very well when you're in first form, and you start to think very early.
City on a hill.
Yeah, a city on a hill cannot be hid. What is your story? One, you want to be that city on the hill that cannot be hid, but how do you do that? What values do you build to be able to say you are that city? So we had great teachers. We had great engagements about being boys, about being men, about responsibility, about the challenges that you have growing up. Outside of that, Munro was a very, regardless of background, regardless of socioeconomic class, everybody was the same. You form lasting friendships, and you get to look at the value of friendships and the value of keeping that core strong. I think Munro did a great job of that. And it came from teachers, it came from just the environment. I always say, when you're out in Munro, if you know where Munro is, actually, it's literally up on a hill. It's the top of the Santa Cruz Mountain.
Is it Munro the highest point?
Highest point.
In Central Spain.
And there's really nothing around to do. You really just have to focus on work, your friends, and moving forward, right? So, the environment is very conducive for self-development. I think Munro really helped in that.
I want to talk a little bit about what they were saying to you, but I have to take our first break. On Profile, my guest is the Honorable Floyd Green, attorney, politician, community advocate, government minister. We'll be back with you after these messages.